still lean pretty Democratic. This 21-point gap actually isn't as big.
Latinos are the fastest growing population in the United States and the second largest voting bloc in the country. In recent elections, Latino voters have been the difference makers in states like Arizona and Nevada, and this is just the beginning. As the share of Latino voters increases across the country, Latinos will also shape the outcome of elections in other key battleground states like Pennsylvania, Ohio, Georgia, and North Carolina. The 2020 election was the first time that a majority of Latino voters cast a ballot. The entire electoral map would change if high Latino turnout becomes the new standard, but that will not be an easy goal to reach. It will require significant investment in the Latino community, which has been historically low compared to other voting groups. That's why Voto Latino's work is so critical. Latinos are on the precipice of enormous political clout across America, but there's still a lot of work to do. In 2020, Voto Latino set out to raise a record $25 million, double its investment in 2016, because we recognized the critical role Latino voters, particularly young Latinos, would play in the presidential election. In the end, Voto Latino far exceeded that goal and raised $35 million, registered 650,000 voters across battleground states, invested $14 million in hyper-targeted GOTV campaigns, and helped to mobilize 3.4 million new and low-propensity Latino voters.
In 2020, Latino voters made up about 13% of the presidential vote.
This historic investment paid off. Unprecedented Latino turnout proved decisive in 2020, and young Latinos became the largest share of Latino voters across battleground states. In Arizona, a state Joe Biden narrowly won with 10,457 votes, Voto Latino invested over $1 million in voter registration efforts and registered 42,260 voters, of which 34,266 voted, and 11,650 of those voters were first-time voters. And while Latinos do not vote as a single bloc, their support for Democrats was extremely high in 2020. But a different narrative took hold on election night that some conservatives called Latin exit. Latinos' rightward shift in Miami-Dade County and Texas's Rio Grande Valley, which account for only a small fraction of Latino voters, became the narrative about Latino voters at large. Latin exit headlines overshadowed Biden's ultimate wins in most of South Florida and the Rio Grande Valley counties.
The biggest mistake that any candidate, especially here in Texas, can take is counting out and discounting the power of young voters and Latino voters.
There is no question that Voto Latino's heavy investments to turn out the Latino vote contributed to the success of 2020. Yet, conservatives' false narratives about Latino voters created a decline in financial support during the 2022 midterms. Only half of Latino voters in most battleground states reported that anyone from a political party, campaign, or any other organization contacted them about registering to vote or voting in 2022.
But when I heard that Roe v. Wade had been overturned, my heart dropped.
Your vote matters, and when you vote for the Democrats, it helps hardworking families like mine.
In fact, Voto Latino developed and tested a campaign to increase turnout in the midterm elections, especially among young swing voters. But it only reached a fraction of its intended audience. Why? Despite being the most effective campaign we've ever produced, twice as effective as past campaigns at persuading swing Latino voters, the red wave narrative proved stronger than our data, and Voto Latino lacked the resources for a full-blown campaign. In the end, Latin exit was nothing more than a catchy name that failed to catch on. Because of this, Voto Latino made the difficult but strategically necessary decision to double down on Arizona and Nevada, and Latino voters came through. Not only did they keep the red wave at bay in Arizona and Nevada, but Latino voters also continued to support Democratic candidates around the country at 2020 levels. One thing we know from the past two cycles is that the 2024 election will be won or lost within our community. The conservatives know it too, and they are investing in the Latino community like never before. We cannot afford to concede a single voter to their restrictive policies. When we have the resources to implement our strategy, we win. And we can create a durable majority for decades to come if we just invest in Latino voters. The stakes have never been higher, and we are determined to meet this moment. Thank you for your past support of Voto Latino. Know that every dollar you invest in us will achieve enormous return on investment in the places and races that matter most.